Well, shalom everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. We're up to page 369 of volume 3 of Rabbi Avigdor Miller's new translation and commentary of the Mesillat Yesharim, The Path of the Just. And just as we kind of close up this particular volume, in addition to the highlights that are at the close of every chapter in this work, in this particular volume we have a further study section which are highlights from some in-depth subjects in select chapters of this particular volume. And in this case we have volume 13, which we're kicking off with, entitled Do Not Be Too Much of a Tzaddik. That's interesting, isn't it? Don't be too much of a righteous person. In other words, this is what it's saying there. And the original chapter 13 itself, is entitled The Explanation of the Trait of Perishut. Perishut is going above and beyond. It's where we get the word perush or perushim, plural, which means set apart one or holiness one, and is where we get the word Pharisee, that I'm sure many of you are much more familiar with, because you got to know that originally that term for that group was not a slur, was not a four-letter word. It was actually a name of a very revered group of devoted men who were builders, were known as the builders of the Torah. And so this particular further study section looks at the concept of not getting too wrapped up in the pursuit of righteousness, because you can end up becoming guilty of the same things that were in Yeshua's crosshairs when he was rebuking them. You can get so wrapped up in your own sort of righteousness that your feet begin to drift away from the ground, and you'll sort of become full of ego and pride. And so we want to avoid this. Okay, let's get into it. The Mesillat Yesharim quoted the verse from Shlomo HaMelech, who in his wisdom wrote a warning to every person who wishes to successfully traverse the narrow bridge which is this world. So many of you are familiar with the narrow gate, the narrow gate that leads to salvation. Becoming trying to be a righteous person is not a path that's like a wide field. It's not like you can kind of do whatever you like. It is a narrow path. When speaking about someone who desires to act righteously, Shlomo warns, don't be too righteous. Rather, one should realize that even if a certain action appears righteous, one must be concerned that it could be the opposite of righteousness. Therefore, a person must examine his deeds from every possible angle. So you're about to embark on a righteous deed. Are you doing it perhaps to show off? Are you doing it perhaps to set yourself apart from the group? It is the custom of truly righteous people, when they're in company of people from varied backgrounds and various levels of observance, to in no way act in a way that shows that you are superior to the general level of the group that you are amongst in that social setting. So you don't want to kind of do anything that's going to draw attention to you and show anybody that's in that group that you are somebody who's distinct, beyond that of imparting sound wisdom and teaching. You don't want to kind of make a big display of how you put on your talit gadol. You don't want to make a big display of how you beautifully recite the Brachot HaMazon or something like that. You just want to you want to blend in with the crowd. You want to blend in with the crowd. So it's a very important concept to understand. So have a think about it. If you're going to do something, are you doing it for the right reasons? It might be a good thing. There's no question, no argument that what you're about to embark on is a righteous act. But sometimes it can be motivated from a place that's less than good. This concept of do not be too righteous can be better understood in connection with what the Mesillat Yesharim writes later regarding acts of hasadut. The Mesillat Yesharim says, what we must understand is that you should not judge matters of hasadut by their first superficial appearance. Rather, they must be looked into to see what will be the results of those actions. Because sometimes an action itself appears good, but because the results would be harmful, it is his obligation to forsake that action and not do it. And if he would do it, he would be a sinner and not a husid. So we have the classic example of Rabbi Zechariah, who was given an animal from the Roman garrison, the Roman occupying force, to be offered in the Beit HaMikdash. And lo and behold, Bar Kamsa, who was publicly shamed and humiliated at a party, he had wounded the animal in the eye, cut a slight nick in its eyelid, and as the Kohanim were going through it, they saw that there was a blemish in the animal, but the Roman occupying force, the dignitaries there, were watching the whole process, and even though it is against the Torah to offer up an animal with a blemish, by not offering up this animal, despite whatever they're going to say as their excuse, the occupying Roman force isn't going to take too kindly for their animal that they have donated to be rejected. So acting on his own righteousness, Rabbi Zechariah turned the animal away, causing the destruction of the entire nation of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem itself and the Beit HaMikdash to eventually be destroyed. So he was acting in a way that was accordance to the Torah. He was being righteous. He was saying, I know this is going to be uncomfortable, boys, but we can't offer this animal up. Had he just gone, listen, we're going to offer up this void animal. It's for Pekuach Nefesh. It's a life risk. We can do it. Everything would have been okay. But no, in this particular instance, it was a disaster. Behaving with hasadut, meaning beyond the letter of the law, requires great wisdom and foreseeing all possible outcomes. Even when a particular act seems like a great act of divine service, one cannot be satisfied. Rather, he has to think deeply about even the most remote possible outcomes. If it becomes clear that there could be negative consequences from that act, then the act itself would be sinful instead of hasadut. Not for nothing does it say in Avot, an ignorant person can be a husid. Acting on the level of hasadut requires tremendous intellect and expertise in the ways of the world. Of course, it requires a broad knowledge of the Torah and the ability to foresee outcomes. The author brings an example from the Gemara. I think this is the one I just brought up. The piety of Rabbi Zechariah, his hasadut destroyed our Beit HaMikdash, burned our sanctuary, and caused us to go in exile among the nations. When Bar Kamsa brought his blemished offering as a plot against the sages, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkalot ruled that it could not be accepted because people would conclude that the blemished animals could be brought as offerings. The other Kohanim wanted to kill Bar Kamsa, but Rabbi Zechariah objected because people would conclude that bringing a blemished offering was a capital offense. In the meantime, Bar Kamsa went and slandered the Jews, saying that they refused to accept the offering in honor of the king, and the emperor sent forces to destroy Jerusalem. So they should have seen, this guy, this Bar Kamsa guy, he was up to no good, and he was banking on the fact that they would reject this animal that was donated to them by the Roman occupiers. And sorry, we can't accept this, and that's rejected, and Rome was offended. And this brought down pretty much the end of the world for residents of Jerusalem. Therefore, the Mesillat Yesharim concludes, so you see that you should not judge an act of hasadut by how it appears at first alone. Rather, you have to turn it on all sides that a person's intellect is capable of seeing, until you can finally make a true judgment of what would be better to do, either to do it or not to do it. It's a very basic example would be an employer tells you, you're working in a warehouse and your employer tells you, see that box over there in the corner? Under no circumstances, I do not want anybody to touch or move that box under any circumstances. And it's a very valuable item. It's the value of the content of that box is worth more than not only our warehouse, but all our franchise of warehouses across the country. And when I come back, I expect to see that box in the same spot unmoved. The employer goes away, a fire breaks out in the warehouse, plenty of time for them to get the box onto a trolley and get it out of there. But the employer in charge of the warehouse says, no, our boss said we're not to move it under any circumstances. So that's just being stupid. So you don't want to sort of be one of these people. It's a fairly basic, extreme scenario, but it gives you a good sort of basic understanding of the application of being a husid. You need to read the room. You need to read the terrain. Blaming Hashem. The Gemara relates another example of misplaced righteousness in a story when Rabbi Yochanan meets his nephew, the orphan of Reish Lakish. The boy was learning the verse. The foolishness of man impairs his path, and his heart frets against Hashem. And that's from Tractate Tanis 9a. Meaning people do foolish things that lead to difficulties, but instead of blaming the foolish things that they did on their own decisions, they blame Hashem for bringing trouble upon them. So are you that type of person? When something bad happens, you blame Hashem for bringing that upon you? Rather, you should look into your own ways and see that perhaps what is happening to you is way less than you really deserve. This is an appropriate context to apply this principle. Do not be too much of a Zadik. This isn't the place to be such a great Baal Bitakon, that is a master of trust or confidence, and say everything is in the hands of heaven, according to Tractate Brakot 33b, because if you would have behaved with wisdom and patience, the difficulty would never have occurred. Rabbi Yochanan understood that this is a fundamental principle in understanding the workings of the world, which can answer many questions. When someone asks, why did Hashem do this? The answer may be, don't be so righteous and say that everything is in the hands of heaven. Recognize that your foolishness can cause problems. So any problems that we have in our lives, whether great or whether small, you can absolutely trace them back to something that we've done recently or in the distant past that needs rectification, and therefore we need to learn maybe a bit of patience today. Maybe we need to learn to be more generous. Maybe we need to learn to become less jealous. It could be anything. And so David HaMelech, when his friends turned their back on him, he wouldn't say, well, his friends are all morons. They're all being idiots. I don't like them. I hate them. He would look into his own conduct. He would speak with Hashem and go, what are you showing me here? What am I doing that everybody's turned their back on me? Show me what I have to get right to get back to where I was, because I'm obviously doing something wrong that everyone's now turning their back on me. So he's not blaming, throwing everything outfield. He's looking at everything that happens to him, good or bad, and he's going, okay, how did this transpire? And he thinks deeply about it and goes, okay, perhaps there's something here I've got wrong. I need to fix. So you're not walking around like this is this is the antidote to being the perpetual victim. You're not the perpetual victim. You're the perpetual aggressor. If anything, you're the one that's gone and done something wrong, whether through ignorance or through laziness or tiredness even. And it might be 10 years from now that Hashem finally decides to address that thing that you did. It might be within 10 minutes of you doing it. But you should always examine when something's gone wrong. You get in a car accident, or something bad happens at your work or whatever. You need to just go, okay. And in most cases, Hashem is acting with us in great mercy. And whatever is happening to us that's bad, it's way less bad than it should have happened. And Hashem is actually mitigating the measure for measure, the midah keneged midah. So he's saying, yep, you deserve to have this, and it's going to be quite overwhelming, but I'll break this up into 4 parts and I'll give it to you in small increments. That's one of the mercies of Hashem. He says, I need to punish you for this. There's no way around it, and the punishment of this could be death. But he says, okay, I'm not going to kill you, but I'm going to break down the punishment into 4 or 5 parts or more, so that I can say, I did inflict that measure for measure judgment upon that individual, but not in one foul swoop that would have killed him. I've drawn it out over perhaps 2 years or something. And so, maybe you're in complications with surgery for 2 years. where the alternative would have been just instant death in a car crash. I know which one I would prefer, 2 years with medical complications in a hospital rather than be instantly hit by a car and killed. So we have to start thinking outside the box. We have to start thinking, what is it that, is it something I've said? I've got to, look into really, would I be okay with this type of conduct or the things I've said today if I could see Hashem was privy to them in real time? No, I'd be pretty ashamed. Okay, well, these things you have to fix. Don't be so righteous so that everything is in heaven's hands. Recognize that your foolishness can cause problems. Rabbi Yochanan wondered, if this is such a fundamental principle, surely there should be at least a hint of it in the Torah. His nephew answered that it was found in the verse in which Joseph's brothers wondered about the great difficulties they encountered in Mitzrayim and how the leader imprisoned their brother Shimon. And they said, and their hearts sank and they were afraid, and each brother said to the other, "This is what is this that Elohim has done to us?" When Rabbi Yochanan heard this, he lifted his eyes toward the child and looked at him sternly. Immediately his mother came and took him because she was afraid of Rabbi Yochanan's gaze. Rabbi Yochanan found it difficult to accept that the rebuke of the foolishness of the man impairs his path and his heart frets against Hashem. Applied to Joseph's brothers. Until then, Rabbi Yochanan understood that when the Shevatim said, "What is this that Elohim has done to us?" it had been an honest and appropriate confession, consistent with the principle that when a person experiences difficulties, he should examine his actions. Now his nephew suggests that their statement had been out of place. Rabbi Yochanan now understands that all the difficulties of Joseph's brothers' experience were a result of their own mistakes. And so we see after they sold their brother into slavery, Yehuda, somebody who was meant to be, somebody who was an example to his brothers, got involved in a business with a foreign person, and his sons died, and went with a lady of what he thought was a lady of the night. And then finally he and his brothers come to Mitzrayim, and they're getting all this drama by the viceroy, who is secretly their brother. And they even, one of them even says, I forget who it was, they say, it's because what we did to our brother, this is happening to us now. Rabbi Yochanan now understood that all the difficulties Joseph's brothers experienced was a result of their own mistakes. If they had listened to Joseph's pleas and not sold him, then Joseph would have never gone down to Mitzrayim nor become viceroy. Then the brothers would have been able to travel to Mitzrayim to secure provisions without any trouble. As a result of selling Joseph, when Joseph saw his brothers in Mitzrayim, he needed to intercede in order to rebuke them. Therefore, they brought their difficulties and fears upon themselves because of the path that they chose. So any stress or difficulty that is coming upon you, it is coming upon you because of a path that you chose. So what about a baby that dies at 1 year old? Well, there's every chance that baby was a Gilgul. It was a soul transmigration. Perhaps the baby in another life was a Gentile who converted, and they kept all the mitzvot that they could, and the only thing they could never fulfill was being a natural born Jew. And so Hashem fulfilled that mitzvah by enabling that neshama to be reborn to a Jewish mother. Once that mitzvah was fulfilled after about a year, Hashem had no other use for the person, no other purpose for the person, and so the baby was removed from the world. And so that neshama can go before the Beit Din of Shemayim and have had now on his record that he fulfilled the mitzvah of being born by a Jewish mother and being circumcised on the 8th day. But from the perspective of the people that they're really upset, and they should be. They're obviously, and they've got things that they've done to experience having the loss of a baby. So and they've got a whole backstory. The way Hashem runs the world is extremely complex, but nothing is random, and Hashem never drops the ball. Even if you aren't buying anything that I'm saying there, Hashem never drops the ball on anything. So no matter how unfair or unrighteous something appears, Hashem it's all planned in the perfect measure. It's clear that all the brothers were completely righteous people. Indeed, they were trying to fulfill the verse, "Let us search out our ways, investigate," according to Ikar 3:40. They knew how to say we are guilty, and because of that, Hashem has done this to us. There we go. That's from Genesis 42:21. I guess they all said that. They sought to understand which sin warranted this punishment. However, while they were examining their deeds to find the sin, they should have understood and recognized their act of selling Yosef led to this result, and there is no need to look elsewhere for the cause. How could the brothers have known that the sale of Yosef would lead to his appointment as viceroy in Mitzrayim? When the brothers sold Yosef, there was no way that they could have known that would result. However, before making a decision, they should have considered every possible outcome of their action. One of the outcomes they should have contemplated was the possibility that Yosef would become viceroy in Mitzrayim. I mean, it's pretty outlandish. Never in a million years would you think that. But, they go, oh, he could, go there and be such an impressive slave that they put him second in charge of Egypt. How would you come up with that? That's like people say you can't write about this. People say, people wouldn't even be able to, you couldn't write this out. You couldn't write this as a story. And in some cases, it's true. Reality is much more bizarre than made up stories. The necessity for Musa, for ethics. The conclusion of these things is that man should arrange his activities intelligently, I'll read that again. The conclusion of these things is that a man who arranges his activities intelligently removes from himself difficulties and aggravation. That's really good. I'll read that again. The conclusion of these things is that a man who arranges his activities intelligently removes from himself difficulties and aggravation. In order to achieve this, a person has to learn Chokhmah, wisdom. In the Sefer Shirei Tshuva, Rabbeinu Yonah explains, according to Shari Tshuva 3:3, that when the term Chokhmah is used in Sefer Mishlei, it isn't only referring to wisdom about the knowledge of the Torah, rather it refers to thoughts that lead to correct behavior and good life. Someone who learns the Musar works will have the tools to live in this world successfully. Therefore, Shlomo Melech says, hold fast to Musar, do not let go, guard it, because it is your life. Mishlei 4:13. One should strengthen himself in the study of Musar and Chokhmah, wisdom, ethics and wisdom, so that he doesn't weaken, because this is what establishes quality of life. A person should be a Talmid Chacham, a wise one and a lamdan, but still lack this wisdom of life because he doesn't learn Musar. Okay, so you can be up at 3 a.m. in the morning learning, you can be first to shul, be giving tzedakah, charity, but you can still lack the application of the wisdom of Musar. He'll find himself tangled up in relationships with neighbors, friends, parents, and family. Despite all his learning, he can become a broken person, and his heart frets against Hashem when he reviews his sins, thinking that they must be the cause of his troubles. In heaven, they respond, the foolishness of a man who pairs his path. He should have learned Musar and behaved according to its teachings. His failure to do so was the cause of his difficulties. This is why the Messianic movement is dying. This is why the Messianic movement is collapsing. This is why the Messianic movement never got off the ground. This is why it never, ever got any traction, because there was no Musar. No Musar. I've been saying this for a good 5 years now. If you are in the Messianic world, you need to be teaching the people and teaching yourself Musar. This is the foundation of everything you're going to learn in the Bible. And if you continue to ignore it, and you continue to, be ignorant of what I'm saying, then things aren't going to work out. It's as simple as that. A glance at a bookshelf that adorns a Jewish home testifies to the extraordinary wealth of our people. Our sages bequeath to us an incredible inheritance of advice and guidance regarding how to succeed in every aspect of life, even the smallest details. The words of the sages teach us how to live peacefully with everyone else around us, how to protect our physical and spiritual health, how to succeed in business, and to be careful with money. Everything is in the Gemara. The following are just two examples. This is a statement in the Gemara from Tractate Sanhedrin 7a. Fortunate is the man who hears something insulting or upsetting, acts as though he didn't hear anything. Fortunate is the man who hears something upsetting or insulting and pretends as though he didn't hear anything. He doesn't let it affect him. It doesn't let him gnaw away at him. Doing so will save him from 100 bad things. So when somebody makes a fool of you or publicly shames you, if you can, stay quiet. This will take away a lot of bad things from your ledger. A foolish man ignores this advice and jumps to answer and respond with full force. In the end, such a response will cause even more pain, but someone who studied Chokhmah and Musa will know to keep quiet in such circumstances, and the evil will pass by without leaving any impression. Another example, one should not set a weak ladder in his home. Tractate Ketubot 41b. A person who leaves a weak ladder in his home out of negligence and foolishness, and a disaster occurs to one of his household, and he responds full of imunah and accepts the divine decree, should know that he is a murderer. Okay, so if you're going to put something that's going to be dangerous, cause somebody to be injured or possibly killed, you're a murderer. The foolishness of a man impairs his path. The fact that he didn't listen to the words of the sages brought about this tragedy. On the other hand, someone who learns Chokhmah and Musa and obeys the sages saves lives. Someone who doesn't learn Musa causes error, and this itself is considered sinful. Natural consequences. Even a Gentile who doesn't learn proper behavior and suffers the consequences deserves these consequences, since he should have learned. This is what the Gemara teaches regarding Avimelech, king of Gerar, who took Sarah after Avram said that she was his sister. Hashem appeared to Avimelech in a dream and told him, "You are going to die." That's from Genesis 23. And Avimelech responded, "Would you slay also a righteous nation? Abraham fooled me and did not tell me that she was his wife." Okay, so that first quote was from Genesis 23, and this was from Genesis 24 through 5. But Avimelech was responsible because he didn't behave properly. The Gemara explains, when a wayfarer, the Gemara is Tractate Bava Kama 92a, when a wayfarer comes, do you ask him about food and drink, or do you inquire about his wife? Is this your wife or your sister? Because they asked the wrong question. Abraham saw that there is no fear of Elohim in this place, and therefore said that Sarah was his sister. It was a foolishness of Avimelech that he hadn't learned proper behavior, and therefore his people asked inappropriate questions of wayfarers, and this was the cause of his guilt. No need to ask who these people are that are with me. They're family members. You don't need to know who they are. It's none of your business. They're family members. Let's leave it at that. Whether she's my sister or my wife or my daughter, who cares? It's just, that's another mouth to feed that's here that we need to have accommodation, and that's it. You can see that she's obviously a woman. Okay, that's it. It's more information than you need. In addition, he'll also be punished by suffering the natural consequences brought about by coming into conflict with the laws of nature. Someone who ignores the laws of nature and Hashem establishes in the world and does as his heart wishes is forewarned by the verse, do not be too much of a Zadok. You should know that he's going to cause damage to himself. Therefore, he shouldn't blame Hashem for the consequences he's going to suffer. It's his behavior that causes those consequences. For example, someone who smokes cigarettes and one day finds that he's seriously ill, and he begins to pour his heart out in confession for all his sins that he thinks led to his illness, should be told, don't be so righteous. Don't search for various sins to blame for your illness. The primary sin is that you were careless with the health of your body and with your own hands brought about this suffering. So you caused the death. Hashem didn't cause you to, or you caused the illness. Hashem didn't cause it, you did. And now, you're asking Hashem to help you because you've mishandled yourself. A verse in Mishlei states, the prudent man sees harm and hides, and fools go on and are punished, according to Mishlei 22:3. A wise man who can see the harm that is likely to ensue from a particular act immediately distances himself from the act and guards against it, but fools who allow themselves to be influenced by their inclinations keep going straight into the arms of danger. They receive their punishment immediately. The word see is used in the verse is meant to teach people their obligation to be seers. Who is wise? One who sees the future. Seers. One who sees the future. Who is wise? One who sees the future result. It's Hashem's will that people use their intellects to look ahead at possible outcomes of every action. A young person at the height of his strength, who permits himself to laugh at warnings and doesn't avoid things which could be dangerous to his health, proves that he is someone who isn't seeing the future results. An intelligent person knows that one cigarette a day leads to 2 or 3, as well as a bleak outcome, because he's doing permanent damage to his body. So somebody who is being reckless in their youth, they're going to grow up one day and become old. And if they keep that reckless mindset up, their body's not going to be able to keep up with their recklessness. And eventually they're going to wake up one day and realize, oh gosh, I've got these aches and pains, and realize that they can't get away with, you can't, and people that are reckless with what they eat, or if they smoke, they might be able to get away with it for a fair few years while they're young, but as they get older, it's all going to come back to bite them. We'll leave it there. That takes us to page 377. And puts us at the topic of healthy living, and that closes out that further study of that chapter, taking us to chapter 14. Clinging to Hashem is the next chapter. Thank you so much for joining me. Got through a lot today. A lot of interesting things to think about in that content that we looked at. And until next time, bye for now.